This is a list of all 45 episodes from the television series Monty Python's Flying Circus. The original air dates do not all apply to BBC Scotland, which took a different approach to airing the series. Series 1 was broadcast at the same time, except for the last two episodes, which were shown on 2 and 16 January 1970. Series 2 was broadcast on Sundays from the 17th of September to the 16th of January 1971. Series 3 was broadcast on Thursday evenings on BBC One at 10:15. Series 4 was broadcast at the same time as the rest, on BBC Two. Series 1 with Canada. It's Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. Famous deaths. Italian lesson. Whizzo butter. The word whizzo would be used throughout the series as the title of various companies and products, such as Whizzo's Finest Chocolates produced by the Whizzo Chocolate Company, for the Crunchy Frog sketch of episode 6. It's the Arts. Arthur Two-Sheds Jackson. Picasso. Cycling race. The funniest joke in the world. 2. Sex and Violence. Flying Sheep, written by John Cleese and Amp. Graham Chapman. French lecture on sheep aircraft. A man with 3 buttocks. A man with 2 noses. Musical mice. Marriage guidance counselor. The Wacky Queen. Working class playwright. The Wrestling Epilogue, written by Eric Idle. Real professional wrestlers portrayed a Monsignor and a college professor who debate the existence of God by wrestling. The Mouse Problem, written by John Cleese and Amp. Graham Chapman. 3. How to recognize different types of trees from quite a long way away. This episode had the longest title, The Larch. Court scene with Cardinal Richelieu. The Larch Part 2. Bicycle Repairman, written by Michael Palin and Amp. Terry Jones. In a town full of people dressed as Superman, a man has the secret identity of bicycle repairman, with the impressive superpower of being able to repair a bicycle with his own hands. Tirade against communists. Children's stories. Restaurant sketch. Seduced milkman. The woman is often said to be Carol Cleveland, but it is actually Thelma Taylor, who is uncredited. Cleveland does appear in a version of this sketch in the film, and now for something completely different. Stolen newsreader. The Horse Chestnut. Children's interview. Nudge Nudge, written by Eric Idle. 4. Al Stretching Time. Al Stretching Time was a proposed name for the series itself. BBC One began colour broadcasting officially on the 15th of November 1969. Since September 1969, however, they had been broadcasting colour programs unofficially, so while the whole of the first series was broadcast in colour, this episode was the first to be advertised as being in colour. Song, Jerusalem. Art gallery. Art critic. It's a Dog's Life in the Modern Army. Undressing in public. Self-defense against fresh fruit, written by John Cleese and Amp. Graham Chapman. First appearance of the 16-ton weight. The 16-ton weight would appear in several more episodes, including the BBC entry to the Zinc Stove of Budapest, Intermission and Blood, Devastation, Death, War and Horror. Secret Service dentists. Many sketches in this episode are ended prematurely by Graham Chapman's army character, who protests rip-offs of the British Army's slogan, "It's a man's life in the modern army." 5. Man's crisis of identity in the latter half of the 20th century. Although the previous episodes had been made in color, this was the first episode to be transmitted in color, after BBC One began color broadcasting on the 15th of November 1969. Confuse a Cat, written by John Cleese and Amp. Graham Chapman. The Smuggler. A duck, a cat and a lizard. Vox Pops on smuggling. Police raid. Letters and Vox Pops newsreader are arrested. Erotic film. Silly job interview, first appeared on How to Irritate People. Careers Advisory Board, Burglar Encyclopedia Salesman. 6. It's the Arts, Johann Gamble Party, Non-Illegal Robbery, Vox Pops, Crunchy Frog, The Dull Life of a City Stockbroker, written by Graham Chapman and Amp. Eric Idle, Red Indian in Theatre, Policemen Make Wonderful Friends, A Scotsman on a Horse, 20th Century Vole, written by John Cleese and Amp. Graham Chapman. 7. You're No Fun Anymore, Camel Spotting, You're No Fun Anymore. The Ordered, science fiction sketch, Man turns into a Scotsman, Police Station, Blancmange playing tennis. 8. Full Frontal Nudity, Army Protection Racket, Vox Pops on Full Frontal Nudity, Art Critic, The Place of the Nude, Buying a Bed, Hermits, Dead Parrot sketch, written by John Cleese and Amp. Graham Chapman. The Flasher, Hell's Grannies, the theme song from the James Bond film Thunderball is heard. This episode repeats a running gag from episode 4. A female cast member delivers a terrible joke, and upon protest from fellow cast members wails, "But it's my only line." Most sketches in this episode are ended prematurely by Graham Chapman's army character from the first sketch, who protests that they are too silly. 9. The Ant, an introduction. Llamas. A man with a tape recorder up his nose. Kilimanjaro Expedition, written by John Cleese and Amp. Eric Idle. A man with a tape recorder up his brother's nose. Homicidal Barber, written by Michael Palin and Amp. Terry Jones. The Lumberjack Song, written by Michael Palin, Terry Jones and Amp. Fred Tomlinson. Letter and Britain's Joke for the Rubber Mac of Zurich Award. Gumby Crooner, The Refreshment Room at Bletchley. Ken Boda and His Inflatable Knees. Brian Islam and Bruce E. The music is Banjo-Reno by the Dixieland Jugblowers. Hunting Film, written by Michael Palin and Amp. Terry Jones. The music to this is Waltzing Trumpets by Harry Mortimer. The Visitors. 10. Untitled Walk-On Part in Sketch. Bank Robber in a Lingerie Shop. Trailer. It's a Tree. Vocational Guidance Counselor. The Larch from Episode 3 reappears. Ron Obvious, the first man to jump the channel. Eating Chichester Cathedral, tunneling from Godalming to Java, splitting a railway carriage with his nose running to Mercury, most time being underground. Pet Conversions, written by Graham Chapman. Guerrilla Librarian. Letters to Daily Mirror. Strangers in the Night. Biggles and Algae from Episode 7 reappear. This is the first episode not to show an episode title at the beginning of the closing credits. 11. The Royal Philharmonic Orchestra goes to the bathroom. Lavatorial humor. The RPO performs the opening of Tchaikovsky's Piano Concerto No. 1 in the bathroom. Interruptions. Agatha Christie. Literary football discussion. Interesting people. Undertaker's film. 18th century social legislation. The Battle of Trafalgar. Batley Towns Women's Guild presents The Battle of Pearl Harbor, written by Eric Idle. Undertaker's film. 12. The Naked Ant. Falling from Building. Spectrum. Talking about things. Visitors from Coventry. Mr. Hilter and the Minehead by-election, written by John Cleese and Amp. Michael Palin. Silly Voices at the Police Station. Upper Class Twit of the Year, written by John Cleese and Amp. Graham Chapman. Ken Shabby. How far can a minister fall? Nobody has anything else to say. 13. Intermission. Short intermission. Restaurant abuse. Cannibalism. Advertisements. Albatross. Come Back to My Place, written by Graham Chapman. Me Doctor. Historical impersonations. Quiz program. Wishes. Probe around on crime. Stonehenge and Mr. Attila the Hun. Psychiatry, written by John Cleese and Amp. Graham Chapman. Operating Theatre. Series 2. 1. Face the Press. Face the Press. New Cooker sketch. Tobacconists, The Ministry of Silly Walks, written by Michael Palin and Amp. Terry Jones. La Marche Futile, Ethel the Frog, Piranha Brothers, written by John Cleese and Amp. Graham Chapman. Introductory music of Ethel the Frog, Piranha Brothers, from Corellier Suite by Jean Sibelius II. The Spanish Inquisition Man-Powered Flight, The Spanish Inquisition, written by Michael Palin and Amp. Terry Jones. Jokes and Novelties Salesman, Tax on Thingy, Vox Pops, Photos of Uncle Ted, the Semaphore version of Wuthering Heights, Julius Caesar on an Aldous lamp, Gunfight at the OK Corral in Morse code, Smoke signal version of Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, Court Charades, Race Against the Credits. The Spanish Inquisitors appear 7 times throughout this episode. 3. De Acute J'avoue a Bishop Rehearsing, Flying Lessons, written by John Cleese and Amp. Graham Chapman. Hijack Plane, The Poet Ewan McTeagle, Hand Trees, Psychiatrist Milkman. Graham Chapman's character changes from Mrs. Ratbag to Mrs. Pym. Complaints, De Acute J'avoue. 4. The Buzz Aldrin Show, An Apology, Gumby Announcement, Architect's Sketch, written by John Cleese and Amp. Graham Chapman. How to Recognize a Mason, An Apology, Another Gumby Announcement, Motor Insurance Sketch, The Bishop. The Peter Gunn theme by Henry Mancini is prominent. Living Room on Pavement, Poets, A Choice of Viewing, An Interview with a Nude Man, The Bishop, Again, Exclamation mark. An Apology, Gumby Frog Course, Another Gumby Announcement, Chemist Sketch, An Apology, Words Not to Be Used Again, Aftershave, Vox Pops, Police Constable Pan Am, Another Apology, End Credits, Last Gumby Announcement. Cardinal Ximenez makes a cameo appearance in this episode. Additionally, one character says, "I didn't expect a Spanish Inquisition," but, being played by Michael Palin, is told to shut up. 5. Live from the Grillo-Mat. Live from the Grillo-Mat. The first item, Blackmail. Terry Gilliam replaces Terry Jones as the nude organist. Society for putting things on top of other things. Escape from film. The next item, Current affairs. Continued from the Escape from film. The next item, Accident sketch. Interruption. 7 brides for 7 brothers. The butcher who was alternately rude and polite. The last item, Ken Clean Air System, on the bus. 6. It's a Living. The Time on BBC One. School prize giving. A film by Mr. Dibley. Rear Window, a film by Mr. Dibley. Finian's Rainbow, The Foreign Secretary and Other News. Free Dung from the Book of the Month Club. Dead Indian. Timmy Williams Interview. Raymond Luxury Yacht. Marriage Registry Office. Election Night Special. 7. The Attila the Hun Show. The Attila the Hun Show, parody of the Debbie Reynolds Show, recreating the opening credits shot for shot and using a knockoff of the theme, With a Little Love by Mike Leroy. The opening sequence appears after this sketch. Attila the Nun, Secretary of State Striptease. Vox Pops on Political Groupies. Ratcatcher. Wayne Skitting. Killer Sheep. The News for Parrots. The News for Gibbons. Today in Parliament. The News for Wombats. Attila the Bun. The Idiot in the Rural Society. Test Match against Iceland. The Epsom Furniture Race. Spotted the Brain Shell 8. Archaeology Today. Trailer. The opening credits appear here. The foot at the end of the credits stays on screen for an unusually long time and then crumbles into the ground, leading into the next animation. Archaeology Today. Silly Vicar and Leapy Lee. Registrar. Silly Doctor Sketch. Mr. and Mrs. Git Roy and Hank Spim. Mosquito Hunters. Puffy Judges. Mrs. Thing and Mrs. Entity. Beethoven's Minor Bird, Shakespeare, Michelangelo, Colin Chopper, Mozart. Judges 9. How to recognize different parts of the body. How to recognize different parts of the body. Bruce's sketch, written by John Cleese and Amp. Eric Idle. Naughty Bits, the man who contradicts people. Cosmetic surgery, camp square bashing, killer cars, cut price airline. Batley Towns Women's Guild presents the first heart transplant, the first underwater production of Measure for Measure. The death of Mary Queen of Scots, exploding penguin on the TV set, written by John Cleese and Amp. Graham Chapman. There's been a murder. Sergeant Ducky's song, police entry for Eurovision Song Contest. Bing Tiddle Tiddle Bong, contest winner from Monaco. 10. Scott of the Antarctic, French subtitled film. Scott of the Antarctic, Scott of the Sahara. The opening sequence appears after this sketch, 17.5 minutes into the show. Conrad Poos and his dancing teeth. Fish license. Derby Council v. All Blacks rugby match. Long John Silver impersonators v. Bournemouth gynecologists. 11. How not to be seen. Conquest to Door Coffee campaign. Repeating groove. Ramsay MacDonald striptease. Job hunter. International Chinese Communist conspiracy. Krelm toothpaste. Shrill petrol. Agatha Christie sketch. Mr. Neville Shunter railroad playwright. Gavin Millar writes. Film director. Dentist Martin Curry. City Gents Vox Pops. Crackpot Religions Limited. A scene at the end, with crosses that are actually telegraph poles, was cut out but can be seen at the end of the episode when the whole show is repeated. How not to be seen. Crossing the Atlantic on a tricycle. Interview in filing cabinet. Yummy yummy yummy, I've got love in my tummy. Music time. Monty Python's Flying Circus again in 30 seconds. A recap of the episode. And now for something completely different, and the opening sequence has a repeating groove. This episode featured many famous characters from different episodes, including Arthur Name and Ken Shabby. Terry Gilliam also reprised his role as the nude organist, a character usually played by Trey Jones. 12. Spam. The Black Eagle. Opening credits. Dirty Hungarian Phrasebook, written by John Cleese. Court. Includes a reference to the UK game show Take Your Pick, where the prosecutor gongs Alexander Yalt for answering yes during a series of questions. World Forum. Communist Quiz. Ypres 1914. Art Gallery Strikes. Ypres 1914. Written by Michael Palin and Amp. Terry Jones. Hospital for Overactors. Includes a Richard III award, due in part to many exaggerations on the character over the years. Gumby Flower Arranging. Spam. Written by Michael Palin and Amp. Terry Jones. 13. Royal Episode 13. The Queen Will Be Watching. In honor of Her Majesty the Queen, a shortened opening sequence plays Pomp and Circumstance March No. 1 inch in place of the Liberty Bell. Coal mine in Llanderog, Carmarthen. The man who says things in a very roundabout way. Commercials. How to feed a goldfish. The man who collects bird watchers' eggs. Insurance sketch. Hospital run by RSM. Mountaineer. Exploding version of the Blue Danube. Girls' boarding school. Submarine. A man with a stoat through his head. Lifeboat. Undertaker's sketch, written by John Cleese and Amp. Graham Chapman. Series 3. In this season, the opening sequence begins with a nude organist, John Cleese saying, "And now," and the It's Man. 1. Wicker's Whirl. Angel's Saga. Opening credits. Multiple murderer court scene. Investigating the body. Angel's Saga Part 2. A terrible mess. Angel's Saga Part 2. North Malden. Starting over. Angel's Saga Part 2. Invest in Malden. Phone conversation about the word Malden in the saga. Eric Njorl court scene. Stock exchange report. Mrs. Premise and Mrs. Conclusion at the laundrette. Written by John Cleeson Amp. Graham Chapman. Mrs. Premise and Mrs. Conclusion at North Malden. Written by John Cleeson Amp. Graham Chapman. Back to the saga. Angel's Saga Part 4. Mrs. Premise and Mrs. Conclusion visit Sartre in Paris. Wicker's World 2. Mr. and Mrs. Brian Norris's Ford Popular. Emigration from Surbiton to Hounslow. The opening sequence follows this sketch. Schoolboy's Life Assurance Company. How to do it. Mrs. Niggerbaiter explodes. Vicar Salesman. Farming Club. Life of Tchaikovsky. Trim Jeans Theatre. The Fish-Slapping Dance. World War II. Titanic sinking. The BBC is short of money. SS Mother Goose. It's Man Show. Shown after the closing credits. Lulu and Ringo Starr appear as themselves. This is one of the few times you can hear the man say something besides it's. 3. The Money Program. The Money Program. Money song, written by Eric Idle and Amp. John Gould. Elizabeth L. Fraud. Film Director Squad. Hands Up. Dead Bishop aka Church Police. Salvation Fuzz. Jungle Restaurant. Apology for Violence and Nudity. Ken Russell's Gardening Club. The Lost World of Roy Orama. 6 more minutes of Monty Python's Flying Circus. The Argument Skit, written by John Cleeson Amp. Graham Chapman. Hitting on the Head Lessons. Inspector Flying Fox of the Yard. 1 more minute of Monty Python's Flying Circus. 4. Blood, Devastation, Death, War and Horror. Blood, Devastation, Death, War and Horror. The Man Who Speaks in Anagrams, written by Eric Idle. The opening sequence follows this sketch. Anagram Quiz. Merchant Banker, written by John Cleeson Amp. Graham Chapman. Pantomime Horses. Life and Death Struggles. House Hunters. Mary Recruitment Office. Bus Conductor Sketch. The Man Who Makes People Laugh Uncontrollably. Army Captain as Clown. Gestures to indicate pauses in a televised talk. Neurotic Announces. The News with Richard Baker. The Pantomime Horse is a secret agent. Anagrams appear throughout this episode. Tony M. Knife It's Flying Rescue from Monty Python's Flying Circus. Chamran Knebt for Merchant Bank. Mary Recruitment Office for Army Recruitment Office. The end credits are all in anagrams. Richard Baker has also done gestures to indicate pauses in the news. 5. The All England Summarise Proust Competition, Episode 31, aired the 16th of November 1972, recorded the 24th of April 1972. Summarise Proust Competition. The end credits appear here. Hairdressers climb up Mount Everest. A Magnificent Festering. Fire Brigade. R. Amen. Party Hints with Veronica Smalls. Language Laboratory. Travel Agent, written by John Cleeson Amp. Graham Chapman. Eric Idle. What is Red Barrel? An Elk's Theory on Brontosauruses, written by John Cleeson Amp. Graham Chapman. 6. The War Against Pornography. Tory Housewives Clean-Up Campaign. Gumby Brain Specialist. Mollusks Live TV Documentary. Report on the Minister Reports. Tuesday Documentary. Children's Story. Match of the Day. An Apology. Expedition to Lake Pahaway. The silliest interview we've ever had. The silliest sketch we've ever done. 7. Salad Days. Biggles dictates a letter. In some video editions, a technical glitch cut some of the dialogue, but the complete original does exist. Climbing the north face of the Uxbridge Road. Lifeboat. Old Lady Snoopers. Storage Jars. The show Sahara, Cheese Shop sketch, written by John Cleese and Amp Graham Chapman. Philip Jenkinson on Cheese Westerns. Sam Peckinpah's Salad Days. Apology. The News with Richard Baker. Seashore Interlude Film 8. The Cycling Tour. Mr. Pillar. Mr. Gulliver. Trotsky. Smolensk. Bingo Crazed Chinese. Not Secret Police. Trotsky. Eartha Kitt. Firing Squad. Eartha Kitt. Edward Heath. This episode is the first episode of Flying Circus to feature a full-length story. This is the first episode that doesn't have a formal opening sequence. Instead, a simple caption, "The Cycling Tour," appears at the beginning of the episode. John Tomaszek, Graham Chapman's adopted son, makes a brief non-speaking appearance as an autograph seeker. The episode was written by Michael Palin and Terry Jones with the exception of the last third, which was rewritten by John Cleese and Graham Chapman. Michael Palin and Terry Jones play exactly one character throughout the whole show. The music to which Mr. Pither cycles is the waltz from Act 2 of Faust by Charles Gounod. 9. The nude organist bomb on plane. A naked man. 10 Seconds of Sex. Housing project built by characters from 19th century English literature. M1 interchange built by characters from Paradise Lost. Mystico and Janet. Flats built by Hypnosis. Mortuary Hour. The Olympic hide-and-seek final. The Cheap Laughs. Bullfighting. The British Well Basically Club. Prices on the Planet Algon. Mr. Badger reads the credits. 10. E. Henry Thripshaw's Disease. Tudor Jobs Agency. Pornographic Bookshop. Elizabethan pornography smugglers. Silly disturbances. The opening sequence follows this sketch. The free repetition of doubtful words sketch. Is there? Single quote. Life after death. The man who says words in the wrong order. Thripshaw's Disease. The footage representing the movie version of Thripshaw's Disease was taken from a 1960 Polish movie Knights of the Teutonic Order. Silly noises. Sherry drinking vicar. The BBC censored this episode probably more than any other, cutting 3 sketches as well as much of Gilliam's animation. 11. Dennis Moore. Boxing Tonight. Jack Bodle v. Sir Kenneth Clark. Dennis Moore, written by John Cleese and Amp Graham Chapman. What the Stars Foretell, written by Michael Palin and Amp Terry Jones. Dr. TV4 and Not TV4 discussion. Lupins, written by John Cleese and Amp Graham Chapman. Ideal Lunar Exhibition, off license. Dennis Moore Rides Again, written by John Cleese and Amp Graham Chapman. Prejudice. Redistribution of Wealth, written by John Cleese and Amp Graham Chapman. 12. A Book at Bedtime Party Political Broadcast. A Book at Bedtime. Red Gauntlet. Kamikaze Scotsman. No Time to Lose. Frontiers of Medicine. Penguins. BBC Programme Planners. Unexploded Scotsman. Spot the Loony. Rival documentaries. Dad's Doctors, Dad's Poofs and Other Interesting Stories. Party Political Broadcast and Dad's Doctors, Dad's Poofs and Other Interesting Stories have been cut out in many versions of this episode. A clip of Party Political Broadcast has surfaced on YouTube, stated to have been found in Canada by David Morgan. It originates from WNED in Buffalo, New York. An identification card is seen at the beginning of the clip, and a support channel 17 phone number shows up at the bottom of the screen. There is also a clip of the last sketch originating from German network WDR with German subtitles. Dad's Doctors has been restored to the iTunes version of the show as well as added to the Netflix streaming video version of the series. 13. Grandstand. This is the second episode without a formal opening sequence. Thames TV Introduction with David Hamilton. Light Entertainment Awards with Dickie Attenborough. Dickie Attenborough, the Oscar Wilde sketch, Charwoman, David Niven's fridge, Pasolini's film, The Third Test Match, New Brain from Curry's, Blood Donor, International Wife Swapping, Credits of the Year. The moment when the two men are discovered in bed together is John Cleese's last appearance in the series. The Dirty Vicar sketch,